Okay guys, welcome to part 2 of my video series, Why Your Mixes Don't Sound Professional. Let's go to the 6th reason quickly. The 6th reason why your mixes don't sound professional is because you don't use compression properly. And when I say don't use compression properly, I'm talking about people actually over compressing everything in a song. And I hear this often, and we need to slow down with compression. Now you need to understand that compression has a function. People most of the time put compression on a sound or on a track because that's what they see sound engineers do on YouTube. Use a compressor because there's a need to use a compressor. And I'm going to do a separate video, go into the details of compressors. But just bear in mind that a compressor is supposed to help you to ensure that your sound is not over dynamic, meaning it's not like going too loud and then too soft. So you want to try to take those very loud sounds that cross the threshold which you set on the compressor plugin. You want to ensure that those loud sounds are brought back to a manageable level, and you want to ensure those very quiet sounds are brought up, right? This is what a compressor should do. So if you don't have a track that is dynamic, you don't need to use a compressor. A compressor is not meant to increase volume. If you want to increase volume, just turn up your volume knob. Okay, just turn up your volume knob. Don't put a compressor and then be happy that, oh, the compressor is making it fatter and thicker. Sometimes it's just psychological. Sometimes it does make it fatter, and I'm going to show you an example. So for this song, I sparingly use compression because I know that most of the samples that we use were cut out of songs that have been mixed, mastered, over compressed already. So there's no point compressing an already compressed sample. You see what I mean? So I only compress when I feel like this thing really needs to be compressed. If you check my channels for the drums, for instance, you see that I don't have compression anywhere except on the drum bus where I have all my drums connected. And the reason is that because I have all these different sounds that are playing at different levels and all that, after using volume to balance them, I still want to ensure that none of the sounds is poking out and everything is like together. And I'll show you how I compress. I use this plugin called the Elysia compressor, Mpressor. And it's a great plugin. It's one of the best sounding compressors I've heard. If you don't know how to differentiate between the sounds of different compressors, don't worry, just use any compressor. The default compressor with FL Studio is fine. So I'm just gonna play this and then turn it off and on, and hope you can hear the difference and why it's important. Without it, with it, that's the gain reduction, about 4 decibels. Without, so what you find is that there is a sort of, would I say, leveling up of the sound. So those sounds that are like the percussions that are not really, coming out, you can hear them more clearly. Secondly, the sound overall is more punchy, like in your face, like the impact is harder. And then thirdly, you can see that it's thicker than it was initially. It's slightly louder, but that's just because I turned up the gain a bit. But normally I try to do what we call gain, is it gain leveling or gain balancing? I've forgotten. But basically it just means that when I compress, I just increase the gain by the amount that the gain reduction is happening. So if the gain reduction is happening by 4 decibels, I'm increasing my gain by 4 decibels, just to ensure that I'm not deceiving myself that it sounds better because it sounds louder. You get. So that's my drums. Now vocals, I don't think I compressed any of the synths because many of them already sound good out of the box. So I'm gonna turn off the compression on this vocal, and then you can hear.
Give you a romantic, come closer, make we pursue cold komodo. Me pon you, you pon me. Switch off the light all night long. Play my song, birthday sex. Da 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 da.
Let me turn on the compression.
Give you a romantic, come closer.
Probably have to turn off the. parallel compression as well, so you're not deceived.
Give you a command tweet, sare wagbao, come closer, oh. Make we pursue cold komodo. Me pon you pon me. Switch
Without compression.
Give you a command tweet, sare wagbao.
Okay, I agree it's louder, but that's because I turn up the gain again. It's the compressor here. It's the default stock compressor for FL Studio. I'm using a 6.6 ratio here, and I'm using a threshold of -20. I'm using the vintage type of compressor, 15 attack, 15 milliseconds. It's kind of short, but not like too short, such that it's like blunting the consonants in the vocals. Then I have the gain turned up because I just wanted it turned up. It was too low, But basically, I just want you to pay attention to the presence in your face. Like the voice is really jumping out at you, and you can feel it hitting you. And then those little nuances in the voice, like you can almost feel the throat of the artist coming out very clearly. So this is without.
Give you a command tweet, sare wagbao, come closer, oh. Give you a command tweet, sare wagbao, come closer, oh. Make we pursue cold komodo.
So that's the compressor. Sometimes the DSR comes after the compressor if it's that kind of compressor where I'm using a long attack and the S's are really like jumping out at me. So a lot of times people just use compression without really thinking, like, do I really have to compress this? These are the only two compressors in the whole of this song. I didn't even compress my master bus because there was no need. It sounded good, it sounded dynamic. I knew already when I was going to master it, I was going to still do a lot of heavy compression. So I didn't, have to compress. But in some songs, if I open some of my projects, you see that I have a lot more compressors, in different sections of the song, because that's what I heard and that's what I felt it needed. So make sure you use compression properly. Don't use it just because you want to use it. The seventh reason, which is quite related, why your mixes don't sound professional, is you don't use parallel compression. Now, I'll tell you this for free. If you don't use parallel compression on anything, your drums, your strings, your guitars, your whatever, use it on vocals for every single song. Like, I can't imagine ever mixing a song without having parallel compression on my vocals. If you remember my video on how to mix vocals in Cubase 5, in that video, I used parallel compression and I used the same plugin. So I'm just going to show you the difference, in terms of what I achieved using parallel compression. So in FL Studio, parallel compression is not as straightforward as in Cubase, where you just set up a effect send, and then you're sending, part of that vocal to it. In FL Studio, it's quite different. You have to set up 2 channels, route all your vocals to those 2 channels. You can see for each vocal, one is routed to Vox Dry, the other to Vox Wet. Vox Dry, I have the compressor turned off. Vox Wet, I have it turned on. It has to be the same compressor on both Vox Dry and Vox Wet. It's a long explanation, and this video is not about parallel compression per se, so I won't go into the details. I could do a separate video for that if you want. But the bottom line is you have 2 channels where all your tracks are routed to, and then those 2 channels are now routed to a final, sort of like bus. Now, what you do is you turn down completely the Vox Wet, the one that has the compressor on. Now, so this is how I have my compressor set up, okay? The threshold very low, the ratio quite high. Sometimes I go as high as 20. A very fast attack, fast release. And then remember that the Vox, the wet, that channel is on 0. And then we start playing the vocal.
If you come closer, make we push you cold komodo. Me pon you pon me.
Then you start increasing this Vox wet channel gradually.
If you come closer, make we push you cold komodo. Me pon you pon me. Switch off the light all night long. Play my song, birthday sex. Da 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 da. Panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all? I'm a cow, Jenny, Emma Von. Oh, panty on the wall. Who's the thickest of them all? Bolu, Sade, Rolani.
So you see what the parallel compression does is that it helps you to still have your main vocal, but have a thoroughly compressed version of that vocal, and then you're mixing in that thoroughly compressed version into the main vocal. So you are getting the benefits of compression, but you are retaining the dynamics in the original vocal. And you can see the difference is really there.
If you will come and treat, come closer, make we push you cold komodo. Me pon you, you pon me, switch off the light.
So it really brings it forward, and what I've noticed is, like, I did a song without doing parallel compression for the vocals about 2 months ago, but when I started mastering, I realized that the voice kept going, like, sinking below the beat. For some reason, kept going below the beat. And I was wondering why. And then I went back to the mix. I did parallel compression, and then the vocals stayed on top of the beat. So no matter what you do, the vocals will always stay on top of the beat because of parallel compression.
If you will come and treat, come closer, make we push you.
So now there's no parallel compression. It's okay. It's not bad, but just notice that, especially when the bass comes on, like I just go to where the bass is, you know, the vocals start hiding.
Panty, panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all?
But when I bring it in,
Panty, panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all?
so that's parallel compression. Now you can do for drums. Sometimes I do it for the drums, you know, but usually I always do it for vocals. Okay, guys. What is the 8th reason why your mixes don't sound professional? The reason is that you don't have enough headroom. So what is headroom? Headroom just means that in your master bus should have enough space. You should not be clipping. Okay, if I pull out a meter, let's try the waves, pass meters. Now just look at this. Let's work with RMS.
Panty, panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all? Amakao, Jenny, Emma Vong. Oh, panty, panty on the wall. Who's the thickest of them?
So, you notice that we are picking at 0, right? So what you're gonna do is to select all your tracks. Don't select the buses. Very important. I'm selecting the special effects bus because it's not really a bus, like it's not routed. So you select all of them, and you simply just turn them down and ensure that you're creating enough headroom.
Panty, panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all? Amakao, Jenny, Emma Vong. Oh, panty, panty on the wall. Who's the thickest of them all? Bolu, Sade, Rolani. Allow me to enter. Let me do you right. Let me be the man for you.
So ideally, when you create headroom, you should do that right from when you start the process of mixing. So as soon as you set up all your channels, you arrange them, you should ensure that you're creating enough headroom on each channel, and always checking your master bus to ensure that you're not clipping. One thing I've noticed is the more headroom my mixes have, the better my master sound. So now I'm picking at like -4.4, -4.7, which is quite good. Sometimes I pick at -6 and I go to mastering that way. And when you go to mastering that way, you'll be very, very happy to see that, you know, your master sound really dynamic, really punchy, loud and clear. If already you're picking in your mix, when you go for mastering, you're going to have issues and you're going to have a very distorted master, and it can never sound professional. So in fact, the more quiet the mix is, from my own experience, because I know other engineers say you have to have a loud mix. Well, not really true for me. Usually the more quiet my mix is, the louder my master usually comes out to be, and I don't know why it works that way. So headroom is really critical, but I'm going to say something about headroom and gain staging, which should be the proper practice, which I do sometimes when I have enough energy. Now you see we're just turning down the volume of the channels. This is not the proper way to do it. Ideally, we should come to, let's say this is the kick. Ideally, we should create a free slot for plugin. We should bring in a gain plugin. I use the Blue Cat gain plugin, and what I do is you use it as the first plugin, and then you turn it down from there. Okay, you turn it down to like -6. Why we're doing that is we want to ensure that the signal flow in your channel is not overloaded. So as the signal moves from, moves to your first plugin, your EQ, your distortion, everything, the signal level is not distorting, like it's not too loud, But when you turn it down at this level at the channel, it doesn't affect what goes into the plugins. So if the plugins are already are getting an overloaded signal, they will still get an overloaded signal, and that will affect how well your plugins perform. For you. So when you do gain staging, if you have enough time, the proper way to do gain staging and to get headroom in your song is to put as the first plugin on all your channels, you have a gain plugin where you're turning down the gain of that track. But well, I'm lazy.
Along with it.
So that's why I just turn down the channels, and it still works for me. So, Okay guys, so the 9th reason why your mixes don't sound professional is that you're using too many plugins and you're over processing. And it took me at least 5 to 7 years to really understand and realize that this is a problem, and it's a really big problem. When you learn mixing, when you learn sound engineering, you tend to want to do everything you see in the videos. When you watch Dave Pensando, for instance, you see his vocal mixing. Sometimes he has like 15 plugins and just one vocal, and you're thinking, oh, I have to use this, use that, use like 5 EQs, 4 compressors, 3 saturators, 4 DSRs. I mean, what happens when you overprocess? From my experience, especially for our own kind of music, like when you mix Afrobeat or Afro pop music, you need to realize that Afro pop music, most of the mixes are quite raw, in your face, very aggressive, and that's just how they are. So to achieve that, you need to cut down on the processing. You need to cut down on the number of plugins you're using, because a lot of times the plugins end up affecting the signal negatively, and that's why overprocessing is not good. But it took me a while. Like, a friend of mine who's a producer in Lagos actually had to tell me, my friend, stop using so many plugins. You're overthinking it. Don't overthink it. If you don't need to use a plugin, don't use it. If the track doesn't sound like it needs that plugin, don't just use it. And that kills a mix very fast, because when you have so many plugins, at the point you're not even sure of what you're hearing. You're not even sure if what you're hearing is correct. And when you go for mastering, the mix sounds, it completely falls apart. Like, it just sounds like shit. So if you check the whole of the song, most of the time I hardly use plugins, and a lot of times I try to use stock plugins, the plugins that come with your DAW. So if you're in Cubase, just use Cubase plugins. If you're in Logic Pro, use Logic Pro plugins. Doesn't matter. You see, just a few plugins. As I'm scrolling through the tracks, you can see that there are hardly plugins. Many of the tracks don't even have anything. They're just like empty, So look at many of my strings. They're just empty. Look at this one. It's completely empty. This one, I just turned down the lows. There's no plugin. So take it from me, if you want your mixes to sound professional, you have to cut down on the use of plugins, and you have to use plugins that you need. One of the reasons why people use plugins in, say, rock music, for instance, is that almost everything you do is live. So you use a live piano, a live synth, your drums, you play a live drum kit, a lot of your sounds, your vocals, everything, your guitars, lead, bass, acoustic, everything is recorded live in. So when you record such live sources, you tend to use more plugins, right? Because you need to sort of tune them to fit your mix. But if you're using 90% of samples like we do, samples and software synths, You don't need to do too much of processing. When you do that, you spoil it. So I hope you learn that lesson and you try to change. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the final reason why your mixes don't sound professional is that you're not referencing properly. Now, you can never get a professional mix if you don't even know what a professional mix sounds like. And when you want to reference one, you need to listen to a lot of songs. And when I say songs, listen to those songs that you want your mix to sound like. Listen to them a lot. In your car, when you go for exercise, for jogging or whatever you go for, go to the club, not because you want to drink, but just because you want to listen to music and how it's coming out of the speakers. And you want to see how people react to the different elements in the music. And it helps your arrangement as well. So referencing, there are certain tips I'll give you right now for referencing that will make your references your referencing process, excellent. Firstly, referencing starts from making the beat. Because when you reference, it helps you choose the right samples. So if you're using this guy I mentioned before, the Magic AB, you load a commercial song. Now, if I play commercial songs here, YouTube might take down my video. So I'm not going to play any of the commercial songs. But, I just come here and I load the track. And then I play it, okay? And then A is my own track.
Panty on the wall.
And then when I switch to B, I'm playing the reference track. So what I do is that when I start to make a beat, I start playing a song that sounds a bit similar to the beat I'm making, just to ensure that I'm picking the right samples. So referencing starts from making the beat. And another thing about referencing is that always try to get a song that is as similar, as close as possible to the song that you're mixing. Okay, there's no point taking a song that is really fast and then comparing to your own song that is very slow. So in terms of tempo, the songs should be similar. In terms of pitch, the songs should be similar. In terms of vibe, like, when I say vibe, Afro pop vibe, like, songs, there are certain songs that we call woro, like when you hear, Duro by Techno, when you hear Woju by Kiss Daniel, those songs have a particular feel. So if you want to do a song that is like that, you pick that one. If you want to do a pum pum song, like this song I'm using for this tutorial is a pum pum song. Pum pum is like, Davido's Eve, Davido's Fall. Like Davido's like the king of pum pum. Run Town, Mad Over You. So if you want to make that kind of song, then you load it onto Magic AB, and then you listen to you compare to your song. The third tip for referencing is that you must reference at the same volume. The moment you're referencing at different volumes, you never get it right. Because if the reference sounds louder than your song, then you are just impressed because it's louder. So what I do most times is I come right here and I turn down the volume of the reference. I turn it down until when I compare with my song in terms of volume, they're the same. I also look at the RMS, here. Make sure the RMS values are similar. Once the RMS values are similar, I know, okay, it's kind of close, okay, the volume level, and then you can now reference. You can check the frequency balance. And that leads me to the fourth tip. When you are referencing, remember to reference the frequency balance using the tonal balance control from Isotope. This is a fantastic plugin. Like this plugin, from when I started using it, it literally saved my life, because now you can basically just open here, create a curve, pick a popular song that you want your song to sound like, or you want to compare the frequency curves, and then it loads and it shows you these ranges for the frequencies, for the low, mid, high, mid, and high. And then when it shows you, what you do is you now play your song. So let me use Davido's Fall, which is, I can't remember which song I used, but let's try it.
Panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all? Amaka, Jenny, Emma.
So you can see that in comparison, my low is perfect, is in line with Davido's song. My high mid is also kind of in range, but my low mid is off, my highs are off. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why I use this EQ. So by the time I brought in this EQ, also from Isotope Vintage EQ, and did all these settings, let me turn it on so you can now see the difference in the frequency balance.
Panty, panty on the wall. Who's the sexiest of them all? Amaka, Jenny, Emma Bong. Oh, panty, panty on the wall. Who's the thickest of them all? Bolu, Shade, Dolani. Allow me to enter. Let me do you right.
So what you do is you start trying to balance everything. You know, you turn up the highs.
Allow me to enter. Let me hold you tight.
As you turn it up, you just watch this side and you see it start going up. Okay, so this is high mids, so what we should be boosting is highs. So you come to high boost. Let's boost around 12k. And you see the high is good, it's now within the range. Okay, the high mid is kind of too high, so I'm going to just turn it down here. Then the bass is also too low, so I'm just going to turn it down. I mean, I'm going to turn it up to meet up. So you get the general idea, right? What you need to do is just pick the right song, create the right curve, create a curve from the right song, the right reference song, and then keep balancing the EQ of your song until you're able to achieve that. Can I show you, if you fall within these ranges, you can even do fine. Fine shows you even ensuring that your song falls within the narrow range. You can even see the specific frequency where you need to boost on the EQ, you know, to make your track sound like, meet up that track in terms of frequency. And this is really a hack. It's a mixing hack. But yeah, so if you do that, definitely when you play your song together with those other songs, and this is not about loudness, this is about frequency balance. Once you find that there's a lot of similarity between the two. So I'm going to... So that's about referencing. If you do proper referencing, you will definitely have a mix that sounds professional, because your song won't be far from the reference song. I hope these two videos were quite useful for you. I hope you learned something new. I hope you can improve your mix, your Afro-pop, Afrobeat mix to sound more professional and closer to the commercial songs that you love. And I hope that I've been of service to you. As usual, if you need my help, if you need one-on-one tutorials, if you need a beat, if you need me to mix a song for you, to master a song for you, basically if you need any music-related service, just hit me up, on the details showing in the screen, and have a good one.